Let's get into our main segment, though. Kicker, let's bring on our guest.
Yeah.
Let's bring on the one, the only, Jacob Thayer of the Hobby Goblins. You know him, you love him, folks. Come
Bring
on
him
in,
on in.
Jacob.
Guys, Jacob Thayer is an amazing community member. I think we're having trouble bringing him in, but he's coming in
Yeah,
right now. He's coming in. We're working on it.
we
But
had
Jacob
some
Thayer
internet
is a
hiccups
guy
on
that
his
I
end.
met purely, he offered to help unload some trucks at Cherokee. That was in February. The next thing I know, this guy's showing up in Atlantic City with his team, all and like helping to unload trucks there too. I'm like, where do you live,
There
man?
he is.
You must be East Coast. There is Jacob. All right. And then
Hey.
finally, he showed up at Texas with even more people helping set up and break down. And turns out this guy doesn't only have an amazing team that's awesome at helping us set up and break down events, but this guy is turns out he happens to be one of the top ranked hobby track competitors right now with some real painting skills. Jacob, why don't you introduce us? Tell us where you're from, how you got in the hobby. But first,
Oh,
what
God.
is your favorite box of cereal?
Favorite box of cereal.
Yeah,
Well, I do cereal late at night, not early in
yeah,
the morning. So it
yeah.
would be
Because you're a
cinnamon toast
grown
crunch.
man. That's how we eat
Grown
cereal.
man,
Yeah.
right? I'm on a
Yeah.
grown man cereal schedule.
Well, what is your cereal?
You got to say what's your
Oh,
favorite
cinnamon toast crunch. Yeah,
cereal?
no, all day long.
There
All
we
day
go.
Okay,
long.
All
all
right.
right. I
Very,
feel
Sure.
like
very good.
it's a good cereal, but it tends to break down real quick, so you got to eat it in a hurry.
Yeah.
Well, I tend to be in a hurry, so it's a match made in heaven.
Perfect. All right, great.
Thank you, Jacob. So Jacob, real fast, how did you get into the hobby? And it seems like your passion. I mean, obviously you're a competitor. I've seen you play. You've kicked my ass. But you're also like really dedicated, I guess, to the aesthetic of your army and the hobby as a whole thing. How did this? What's your background? How did this all happen?
Sure. Yeah. So, been doing tabletop stuff for a long time. D&D. I learned to paint miniatures. The original Necromunda was probably some of the first
Wow.
miniatures I painted. I engaged in 40K early on from a competitive level, just trying to play the game and beat up my friends. And it was just oceans of gray plastic on the
Yeah.
fifth edition era. So ninth edition, I got kind of pulled back in. Friends had interest. We embarked on the journey together, and we wanted to make sure everybody had that painted army to start with. So the first leg was everybody getting their army battle ready. And since then, it's just stuck. I've found that I really enjoy the experience of the painted army at the game, arguably more than painting the army itself. That is work.
Yeah.
But it's just that's stuck. That's kind of the fundamentals of the club. Was a couple of guys that were doing art related stuff, and a couple of other guys got into 40K, and all of us. I was kind of the bridge, and all of us together just get together weekly to do that very thing.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you are basically the community in Jacksonville, Florida. I mean, you guys if people want to play 40K, they know that the Hobby Goblins is the most welcoming group of guys in Florida, or at least in the northern part of Florida. Come hang out with you guys. You'll teach them how to play, teach them how to paint, and get them hopefully to an event, right? I mean, that's
That is the goal to a degree.
yeah.
Now, our game space, our HQ, if you will, is my home studio where we do all of our commission painting and everything like that as well.
Oh,
So
so you guys
I
do commission painting as well, right?
that's right, that's
Cool,
right. Hobby Goblins Creative is the brand for us that does all of our commission painting.
cool.
But unfortunately, that doesn't allow me to just open up the game room to anybody. We do have to be somewhat selective on who comes around here to maintain that culture.
Yeah, I
But
still
we
haven't got
are
in.
we are doing the same things that we're doing for the frontline events. If we show up, we're showing up to set up, and we're showing up to help break down, and trying to promote a positive community,
Cool.
hopefully having an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed. All your guys, you have these really cool. You're wearing one right now. These really cool Hobby Goblin jerseys, and you can see your guys, yeah, in the middle of any event, and every single one of your players, yeah, it may be really cutthroat competition, but you guys are all like having a good time. You're
Mhm.
generally
Right.
nice human beings with pretty damn impressive armies on the table,
Thanks.
and everyone's smiling. I mean, everyone's having a good time, and that's kind of the epitome, the ideal kind of opponent is to go against the Hobby Goblin. Um,
Well, that's how we train.
yeah,
Like I talk about the cave here, we've got a rule here at the table is not only do we play to intention, we play to intention at an extreme degree. 40K is best played with an opponent, not
yeah,
against an opponent,
yeah,
and
yeah,
this
yeah.
training ground allows us to kind of insulate one another from making mistakes and discuss how to improve the things that we're doing and prepare ourselves for the table. So when your practice grounds are like that,
Yeah.
you tend to perform in that same fashion, right?
Man, I
I,
love it.
I tend to behave in the same way regardless of what the stakes are.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
awesome, man. Well, Seth and I wanted to bring you on because you are, very well. Seth, do you know where he's in the hobby track right now? Do you know off the top of your
I
head?
believe last week he was second
Okay, second. So you're
to
you're up
Yeah,
there
Elise Steiger.
in the very,
Um,
and I know that some scores need to get submitted and get
yeah,
fixed,
but
but
yeah,
that's what I
yeah.
had available last week. Side note: I don't have ITC rankings for this week, folks, because part of the website being down is the ITC rankings.
And
no,
let me tell you this: to
yeah,
be in the top three with some of these titans that are, I'm happy enough anywhere, any spot on the top three. You look at any of those Aegis Games guys; they do work at the hobby
yeah.
table.
Oh,
They do.
yeah.
Absolute gentlemen. But I'll share a podium with them anytime.
Oh man. Well, Jacob, we wanted to ask you, maybe you can give Seth and I and some of the people listening and watching at home, like, the tips to maximize your hobby score at events. I mean, you've got this
Okay.
down to a pat because event after event, you're being successful, and a lot of your guys are also, doing really really well. So
Mhm.
what is the, like, is it the battle board? What are the things that really, step up your hobby game?
Well, I'll let you in on a secret.
All right, good.
I do cheat. Probably shouldn't say it on air. But I'm an
We're
orc
not
player.
judges. It's okay.
Right? I'm an orc player. As far as I'm concerned on the hobby track, that is a big cheat. I can take literally any kit at any time. I can disassemble it and throw it back together however I want to, and I
Yep.
have that absolute creative freedom.
Yeah,
So the first tip to everybody out there would be, throw away your old armies and just buy
just
orcs.
just play orcs.
But a practical answer, a practical answer is that you can prepare for the hobby track. You can approach it like any other competition and have a strategy in the composition of your build. But the first and foremost, the absolute most important thing is that you're doing something for yourself.
Yeah.
You're doing something that you're going to enjoy for a long time come. Once you're no longer able to attend events and potentially win paint, it's got to be something that you can look back on and be fond of. So my answer to your question, the best thing you can do to increase your chances of the hobby track would be to love what you do and share that with
Yeah,
others.
I'm into that, man.
I'm very fortunate that I've got several artists around here that we're able to engage on this journey together and give feedback and kind of learn new tricks side by side. And so each of us are growing at a greater rate than any of us could by ourselves. So find a group, create one if there's not one, and share this experience.
So you've alluded to it a few times. So having a team that's not only your team that's going to events, your competitive, I guess, opponents, sparring partners, if you will, but they're actually your team for I guess the hobby side of things too. I know
Hey,
you
this
told me
is a
that it was
club.
really, yeah, you told me
That's
that it
what
was
it is
really good to have
first.
ideas to, bounce ideas off of them, or color
Mhm.
ideas and stuff. Like, that really makes a lot of sense. We put so much value into having a group of guys to wear a jersey and go to a tournament and go play together. But I think that having guys that you can really count on for the hobby side is pretty damn valuable too.
Look, I'll tell you my favorite part about a tournament, and we got to share one of these moments with you at Lone Star. My favorite part about a tournament experience is, being exhausted at the end of the day, sitting down and having a bite of meal, and everybody sharing their experience.
Yeah.
That's the most fun part of it. There are times that fifth game rolls around, and I say, all right, well, did I get my 3 wins in? Can I? You saw this at Lone Star too. I said, can I go to the pool yet? Do I have to
Yeah,
play the rest of these games?
yeah.
Um,
Well, okay, so I got to ask because your display board is pretty epic. I'm sure you can rattle off
Thanks.
the dimensions in a heartbeat, but it's a pretty big structure. Both, it's
Sure,
wide, it's tall. There's components. I think it's like it's got lights to it and stuff. There's a lot
it
of moving
does.
parts. How, like, is transportation a critical factor? Here I am talking about going to Cruise Hammer, and I'm trying to fit everything into this small little bag so I can get on
Right.
board. I mean, is that something that really determines the size of your battle board, or determines what you're going to do for your hobby projects? Because you are going to events. I think you're going to LVO. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't. You were thinking about driving, right? Because of the hobby element, it's just too much to fly
Yeah.
with, right?
More than that, yeah, we're looking at potential tour buses.
Oh wow,
The amount of traveling that we do and the amount of space that we take, if we can cram 10
dedication,
nerds in a bus, that'll be a hell of a trip to Vegas.
dedication. So the transportation is something you really have to
Sure.
consider. Seth, I know when you go to tournaments, do you still bring a display board or anything?
If it's a drivable tournament for me, I will.
Yep.
This weekend's a drivable tournament, so I'll bring a display board. But if I get on a plane to go to like SoCal,
Yeah. No.
I'm not. And I know I have seen people do multiple levels of display board. We can't talk about Hobby Track without talking about Sean Naden.
Oh yeah.
Sean is kind of well known for having his flying display board and his driving display board, which is of a different quality.
Yeah, yeah.
So he has, his big version, and then if he can't do it, he's got a smaller version, so he can still get those points for hobby track. He might not compete for best painted necessarily with that bigger board or with that smaller board, but he still is able to get those hobby track points, and that's how he's able to take down Renman so often.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Very cool. What do you guys think about the composition of your army? So, you know, Jacob, you're going to these tournaments, and you're
Right.
obviously running to be one of the most hobbyist here, have the best beautifully painted armies, and win
That's
the
the
hobby
goal.
track.
Yeah,
But do you adjust your army's playability, I guess, for a thematic army that looks cool? I mean, if we're
absolutely.
playing Space Wolves and you got a bunch of Thunderwolf cavalry, that might look awesome, but it might not be the best army list. Like, how do you
Yeah.
balance that out?
Well, very much so. A lot of times, I pick the army based off of what I want to show off.
Yeah.
For Atlantic City, for Cherokee, for example,
Yeah.
Cherokee was the first time I played Army of Renown, the speed mod
Oh,
for orcs, and I
cool.
did that specifically to show off a pirate ship battle wagon I made, and a couple of Valkyries that I'd mashed into a Wasp bomb. And I said, like, these kit bashes have to be on the table. What supports it?
Yeah.
And I did fairly well at the list because Army of
Yeah.
Renown is pretty decent, but had I not been working on those kit bashes, I would have done my regular MSU nonsense and gone about my business.
So the strategy here is paint stuff you'll really get excited about, bring a thematic army list, and then just get good. Learn how to
Right.
play that list the best you possibly can. Cool, cool.
Right.
Uh, hey Seth, you're kind of our competitive side here, and let's take the competitive element of this. I mean, the hobby track. It does add a lot to our tournaments, right? It
Mhm.
detracts from the
Yep.
judges being able to go judge tournament. Like it takes a lot of time for them to go paint, judge 100, 200, 300 at LVO, 600, 700. And it takes a lot of time to go do that. Should the hobby track be part of a competitive tournament in terms of a match play tournament? Like, is that an element that should be involved? Should be a separate element of it? Should be a whole tournament on its own? Maybe we do the paint judging on Friday, and then just what are your thoughts,
Yeah.
Seth?
I've seen events do it every which way.
Mhm.
And I really would be interested for Jacob's take here afterwards. But I've seen events do voluntary paint judging.
Yep.
So your army doesn't have to be paint judged. But if you want, they'll say, hey, if you want your army paint judged, have it set up in this time or come to this location. I've seen events do mandatory paint judging. For instance, this weekend, Warzone Giga, they will go around and paint judge every army, because they have a big emphasis on their overall scoring as well. So
Cool.
they're going to be combining that. And I've seen events do no paint judging as it relates to the tournament, but on a side note, you can enter models for best painted
Cool.
elsewhere, and that's a very different thing because if you're setting a model up to be displayed for the weekend, you can't have that on the table.
Yeah.
But that does, in Jacob's case, if that was how an event was run, he might be able to bring that converted battle wagon, and then his list is not tied to having a battle wagon in it.
Oh,
He's
yeah,
got
yeah,
that
yeah,
one
yeah.
piece that he's worked on and he's excited about. He's putting that up for paint judging, and he can still run whatever arm he wants. So there's pros and cons to all of them. I think having some form of paint judging is important for events, period, end of sentence, because where else can painters like Jacob go and show off their work? We can show, on pictures on Instagram, Facebook,
Yeah.
whatever. But where do you get a chance to go see those things in person and compete with other painters of equal caliber and say, all right, who brought the best this week?
Yeah.
So if you take that away, I
Yeah.
think you're taking away from a part of the community that comes out to have that experience. But there are a lot of ways to do it, and I'm interested to hear from Jacob what he thinks would be the way the painters want it done, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. When you break it down into your best paint, your Renman, and your first place wins, it creates different environments for sub communities to kind of gather, right? Specifically, best paint, specifically, top of class, first place, right? In the competitive side. So having those three kind of areas that can raise up the person that achieves the award, I think is valuable. I think that having there's plenty of people out there who might have been decent painters and have become fantastic painters because they have a venue to come and grow.
Yeah.
I think it should absolutely be judged. I just think that, and this might segue into something else, but I think that it needs to be in a way that the person being judged can grow from it. If
Yeah.
you are at an event and have no idea what was seen or unseen, or what you were given credit for, or any feedback on how to improve, you kind of find yourself having to go outside to figure that out. If we want to offer paint judging, we should offer a system in which we are cultivating those painters at the same time.
So let's explore that, because that's really valuable stuff here, right? Because we see it through our lens, but we need to see it through you, a competitive hobby track, and player in general. How should it be standardized? What should be the rubric, the formula at events? I can't speak for all the events, but I can definitely speak for Frontline Gaming events. That there is a formula, but I think that it should probably be more visible or clear at every single event. You know exactly what the rubric
Mhm.
is. But what do you think? Should it be should the hobby side of the competition be the same sort of standardized set of rules and rubrics that you have for the competitive side? We're all playing the same missions. Should there be something across the board, whether you're in the USA or Uganda? You got the exact same kind of thing you're going to be scored on when it comes to your hobby stuff. Is that something like, how do we roll this out, and what do you think? Just take it away, Jacob.
So to standardize it, I think that's a beautiful idea. I mean,
Mhm.
if you could execute it, fantastic. But I think more important than the standardization is just the transparency.
Yeah,
Again, knowing how you've performed, and
yeah,
if you're provided a rubric to follow along with the judge, if my rubric is different than yours, but I've got it in hand, then
yeah,
I've got that data to further my journey.
yeah.
So a standardized rubric, yeah, it's a great idea. I think it's something that could be adopted, but I think that even if we get something that's absolutely perfect, 9 out of 10 people, you're going to have 1 out of 10 there that's going to make that little shift, and they are going to deviate as time goes on.
Yeah,
As long as the results are transparent, that's fine.
yeah. Seth, I believe you're telling me that one of the events you went to, they had a painting rubric, and then a week later, the scores were offered up to the players.
Yeah,
Is that
so
is that
that's
accurate?
that's the Warzone group again,
Okay, that's
and
fine.
I'll use them as reference here because I want to follow up on the rubric idea. The Warzone group do a painting rubric, and it's usually published in advance, so you can know I have to achieve these types of paint standards, and it's things like they have like basically highlights as a category, and then within that there might be like the army is not highlighted, 0 points. The army key figures in the army are highlighted, and that's like half the credit. And then all models are highlighted, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So a pretty standardized rubric. And what they do is they publish those um, overall scores, which are a combination of paint and sportsmanship and your battle points for their system. And they usually publish that as in a spreadsheet a week after, so you can see where did you rank on everything. Now, the problem with those types of rubrics is if you provide gamers a rubric of how we will score you, they will max the rubric.
Mhm.
And then what ends up happening is you run a large event, 100, 200, 300 player event, you might get 20 or 30 guys that max
That's a
a rubric.
good point, Seth. I didn't think about
And
that. By
and
publishing.
and from Jacob's end, then how a lot of events I've seen run it is they'll have a voting, either player voted or judge voted or whatever. But that might not necessarily give you the feedback you want because you and 20 other guys, we all have max rubrics. Okay, cool. But he won best painted. Why did he win and not me? Well, he got more votes. Okay, well, why did he get more
Sure.
votes? So if you do a rubric and you do a voting system, there can still be some of those feels bads. If it's maybe more of a judge voted decision at that point, you might be able to get a bit more targeted feedback.
Yeah,
I would actually be interested. There's two large painting competitions, Golden Demon, which
yeah,
took a few year break, but it's back. But when it took its break, I believe at Depticon, another group started running the Crystal Brush.
Right.
yeah.
Another
I like
and
it.
and those are, from my understanding, a pure judge voted system on both of them, to determine winners, and they provide, from my understanding, verbal feedback to the top placers. Why did so and so win and not you? So maybe that might be a scenario. If if a rubric could cut down a lot of the judge work to a half dozen players, and then the judges can pull those armies. I think when we were at FLG, no, GW New Orleans, kicker, they tapped us for painted there, and I
Yeah,
believe you were there as well, Jacob. Right?
Hmm.
They tapped
I
all
was.
three of us, and we brought our armies out for display for further examination and voting. So maybe that's a system to borrow from.
So I mean, okay. So Jacob, do you think that? I mean, it seems like you definitely want your. We all agree that there should be a rubric, and there is a rubric for LVO. I
Right.
can promise you that, guys. That's a set rubric. We have it at every LVO. But
Mhm.
you guys, I mean, Jacob, you'd want your rubric handed over to you to know that you maxed that out, correct?
Sure. And
Yeah.
I would like to see that rubric created that if you achieve a max score on it, then that's a $10,000 piece of art. You know,
Yeah.
rubrics are frequently the ones that I've seen that are used are kind of vague in how they're presented, and
Yeah.
they'll have a single check mark for 8 different things. If you do one of those things, you've got the check mark.
Yeah.
And if everybody are getting top scores on rubrics, or you've got too many top scores on rubrics, your rubric is too soft,
Yeah.
right? And
That's
if you've
fair.
got
That's fair.
a good firm rubric that's taking a look at all the different techniques and all the different things that can be applied to both an army and a display board. um, I mean, if you have that, then they can get better. That's exactly a part of what I'm talking about. That's guidance.
I,
And if you do have a couple people tie, well, if they know that they've maxed their rubric, that's a lot of times more information than they might receive otherwise.
Yeah.
They might leave thinking, "Where did I lose points?" Right?
so
And if
let
they
me
gotten
let me
that full
hop in
credit,
and provide a
You-
counterpoint here. I
sure.
think if you make a very exhaustive rubric, you might run into two issues. The first is a new painter coming up might be intimidated by a very exhaustive rubric, um, and that can scare them away from trying to even go down that road. And I think it may also uh, put a if particularly if you're doing an event where everyone is paint judged or a lot of people volunteer to be paint judged, that can be a pretty intensive process to go through
So
that.
that's a good
Sure.
point because we do have
Well,
literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people getting paint judged
well,
at
let me
LVO.
let me
Easy
propose a
fix.
solution.
S-
You
s-
have
Yeah.
two scales of rubrics. You have the
Ooh.
general rubric that maybe is your overall rubric, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
If you're this is everyone gets to compete for overall using this paint rubric, but if you're going for best painted, step above overall, what if we had a separate rubric that was that exhaustive? And then you can say, okay, you have to max the first rubric and volunteer for further paint judging in order to be in that second round with that harder rubric.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where my thoughts are on it.
Mhm.
That one of the things that GW did, like you mentioned, is they tapped us. They had us set up our boards, and at that point, that's when they're applying that rubric.
Yeah.
Right, they're applying the rubric to 17 or maybe 20 competitors, and taking the opportunity for photo ops, which I never really saw. Um,
Yeah. Same
right,
as, but yeah.
so and that's kind of the same thing. If an FLG event has 200 people, there's not 200 people that need to go through a rubric. There's only those that are really selected to that showcase level. I'll
Ooh,
tell you,
ooh, we have a
Lone Star
good
was
good
rough.
name here.
Lone Star was rough. There was a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
competition out there.
Peachan
A lot of beautiful
126
armies. The paint
said we
judging
should
was a
have battle
challenge.
ready and parade ready.
Ooh. Ooh.
Okay,
Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you
No,
got you got the battle ready rubric. Cool. You got your paint. You got your 10 points.
you get to go. Yeah. I
Parade
actually.
ready. You got
right,
to go
and
fight
that's
Jacob.
simply resolved.
Yeah.
That's simply resolved. Now, the exhaustive part, which I don't have an easy solution for. The only solution I can give you is not the best solution. But if I judge paint, if you don't make showcase and you still want feedback on your army, I want to chat with you about your army. And if that means that, hey, we have to end up in a Facebook chat and let's discuss it over the next couple of
Yeah.
weeks, and you send me hobby progress and we keep up in that rate, that's the involvement I want in the community. That's
Oh
that's
yeah.
what I
That's
want to
cool.
see happening. And TOs can't do that. That's
No.
an unrealistic expectation to put on any TO staff to say, "Hey, you're running paint. You better make these lifelong friends with everybody you meet." Um, but again, we're talking about what would be the utopian sort of experience.
So
Yeah.
so what we have for LVO and this is basically what we've done previously, but now we're making a little bit more, I guess, tightened up for 2023 is there is going to be a rubric. There, basically the people that do the best on this rubric, so probably let's just call it 50 people maxed it out, 25 people
Okay.
maxed it out, then those people will go get their armies individually judged by none other than Duncan Rhodes and a few other, deemed painters, and then they're going to basically be the judges. I don't know if they're going to be, I don't think they're
Do
going to be
you,
operating off of a formulaic rubric
do you
other
know
than just
why
being.
I laughed, Kicker?
Why do you laugh?
Do you know what chat just asked?
What did chat ask?
John Q in chat said, with Duncan Rhodes at LVO, will he have any input on paint scores this year?
Yes, So Duncan Rhodes will be one of the final, I guess,
The final boss.
the final boss for the painting competition for the 40K champs, for the Age of Sigmar champs, and then for the come on, the Game of Thrones game, Song of Fire and Ice. So he just personally really likes that game. So basically, at LVO, if you make it through the first rubric maxing out, and you're one of the selected ones to go there, then Duncan, as well as a few other painters, will steam painters will be basically judging you, and they will choose the final top 3, and then make that call. But I think it would be kind of cool if we did have what we're talking about, basically an intro rubric, and then okay, now we're really getting serious, and you spend more time discussing it. And I think the follow-up, yes, it's an idyllic thought, but to have the follow-up afterwards, to have that conversation with the painters so the painters can get better, would be amazing. I feel like that's
And I think that's doable with a first cut system where you're cutting, because if you told me I had to have a paint judging of 200 players in a room and every one of them was going to come up to me and want feedback, I'd be like, oh crap. If you're like, all right, we're going to cut, we're going to use a rubric, we're going to cut to 10 guys and you're going to judge amongst those 10 and they may want some feedback from you. That's a much more doable scenario for a judge or a TO.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Well,
Jacob, says, can Duncan present badges like Pokemon gym leaders?
Sure, let's do it. I'm sure he'll be happy to do that. I really hope Duncan doesn't hate us after the first event.
Duncan never comes back.
He's like, I'm never doing LVO again. Jacob, before we move on to the next segment here, I did want to ask, Frontline Gaming is core group of staff judges. I know that they're working on stuff for LVO. I'd love to submit it to you, let you get a once review before it goes public, to say, hey, what do you think? And maybe you and JT and some of the other real competitors out there, kind of give us your feedback before we say, okay, this is what we're using for LVO. Would you be cool with that?
That sounds great, and that's exactly what I was going to say. I would love to get Noah Bedome, JT, Lee Stager. I'd love to put it in front of them and get their feedback as well. Again, these guys are monsters at the hobby table. They're contemporaries of mine if I'm lucky. Right. So I would love to have them involved as well.
Cool. So I'll see what I will make that happen, so that before anything is finalized, we'll get you guys involved in that final call. I hope if Adam Solis and John are some of our Frontline Gaming staff judges are in chat, I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm making that call right now. So we'll involve these.
Well, they're not immediately screaming, so if they're in chat, they haven't either heard you or been upset.
All right.
Kicker, Jacob, any final thoughts for the night?
Guys, I'll be gone next week most likely, unless there's really good internet on the boat. But
there won't be.
We'll report from Cruise Hammer when I get back. Thanks again for joining.
You could probably do Facebook reports.
I can do Facebook. I'm good at
picture,
that.
text, all that.
Yeah, I will say out there, you can find me on Facebook. I've got a big green goblin face, so you find that on Facebook. Add me. I can get you in our Discord. That's our online community that we're trying to foster the same thing that we are in a grassroots fashion. So shoot me a message.
Sick commission, like high end, beautiful, like top quality commission stuff too. Right?
We just had a Bellicor leave here that's been all over the Chaos Sports. I had plenty of people at Lone Star say, "Oh, you guys did the Bellicor," So that's a talented artist. You check him out at Cryface Design. He is an artist by trade, and it shows in his work.
So you guys can find Jacob on Facebook pretty easily. Of the Hobby Goblins, you can't miss him. Jacob there. Seth, you want to take us out?
Yeah, we thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Signals from the Frontline. We really hope you enjoyed it. Have a great week, and we will see you at Cruise Hammer.
Yeah. Good night, guys.